"Daddy, please help her." The little girl's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, thin and trembling, and if you've ever wondered how fast a quiet life can shatter into something unforgettable, stay with this story until the end. And if stories of true kindness move your heart, like the video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales right now, because moments like this deserve to be shared. Aries had never wanted to be a hero. He was just a single father in his early 30s, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table and warmth in a tiny rented apartment. His mornings began before sunrise, packing lunchboxes, tying shoelaces, and brushing the hair of his 7-year-old daughter, Zara, who had eyes too observant for her age and a heart far bigger than her small frame. That evening, after a long shift at a warehouse, Aries took Zara to a small street market to buy vegetables. The air smelled of dust and frying oil, vendors shouted prices, and the world felt ordinary, until it didn't. Near a dim corner of the street, a woman stumbled backward, her dupatta slipping from her shoulders as 2 men blocked her path. Their voices were low but sharp, their laughter ugly. People noticed, but like so many times before, they noticed just enough to look away. Aries felt Zara's small hand tighten around his fingers. He tried to move past, telling himself it wasn't his fight, that he had a child to protect, that getting involved could ruin everything. But then Zara stopped walking. She tugged his hand and whispered the words that would change his life. "Daddy, please help her." Aries followed her gaze. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, her back pressed against a shuttered shop. Something old and heavy stirred in his chest, the memory of Zara's mother, gone too soon, and the promise he'd made to raise his daughter to believe the world could still be kind. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm, asking the men to leave the woman alone. They laughed, taller, broader, smelling of alcohol and arrogance. One shoved him. Aries staggered but didn't fall. Zara cried out behind him. That sound snapped something inside him. He moved without thinking, years of suppressed anger and instinct colliding. He blocked another shove, struck back when he had no choice, his knuckles burning, his breath ragged. The scuffle was fast and messy, drawing a small crowd. One man slipped and hit the ground hard. The other backed away, shocked that a quiet-looking father had resisted. Sirens wailed in the distance. The men ran. The woman collapsed, shaking, saved but silent. Aries stood there, heart hammering, hands trembling, not with triumph, but with fear of what he'd just risked. Police arrived, questions were asked, statements taken. The woman thanked him through tears before being escorted away. Aries thought it was over, that life would simply return to its fragile normal. He took Zara home, cleaned a small cut on his hand, and tucked her into bed. She hugged him tightly and said she was proud of him. He smiled, but inside, worry gnawed at him. He didn't know that someone important had been watching from a car across the street, or that the choice he made for kindness that night would echo far beyond that dark corner of the market. The next morning, Aries woke before his alarm, the events of the night replaying in his mind like a loop he couldn't shut off. He made breakfast, helped Zara get ready for school, and tried to act normal, though a tightness sat in his chest. At work, whispers followed him. Someone had filmed part of the incident, and the video had begun circulating online. In it, you could see a tired-looking father stepping between 2 men and a frightened woman, hear a child crying for him to stop them. Some comments praised him, others warned he'd been reckless. Aries didn't check for long. He couldn't afford distractions, he needed overtime, stability, a future for Zara. That afternoon, as he waited outside Zara's school, a sleek black car pulled up beside him, completely out of place among the dusty motorcycles and rickshaws. A sharply dressed man stepped out and asked his name. Ari's stomach dropped, expecting trouble, legal consequences, maybe worse. Instead, the man introduced himself as an assistant to a CEO and politely asked if Aries would come with him. Fear and disbelief tangled in his thoughts, but Zara stood beside him, holding his hand, and he remembered the promise he'd made: courage doesn't disappear when you're scared. He agreed, after ensuring Zara would be safely dropped home. The drive took them to a glass and steel building that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Inside, everything gleamed: floors, walls, people. Aries felt small, out of place in his worn shoes and faded shirt. He was led into a spacious office where a woman in her 40s stood by the window, her posture calm but powerful. She turned, and Aries recognized her instantly. She was the woman from the street, the one he'd helped. Cleaned up, confident, she looked nothing like the trembling figure from the night before. She smiled softly and thanked him, not as a CEO, but as a human being. She told him that those two men had been part of a group that had harassed employees and vendors for months, and no one had ever stood up to them. His intervention hadn't just saved her, it had sent a message. Aries listened in stunned silence as she explained that she ran one of the city's largest logistics companies. She'd reviewed his background, his work history, his struggles as a single father. She spoke of courage, of values you couldn't teach in boardrooms, of a little girl whose compassion had moved her as deeply as his fists had stopped her attackers. Aries expected praise to end there. Instead, she offered him a job, one with training, benefits, and hours that would let him be present for Zara. Not charity, she emphasized, but opportunity. She said companies needed people who acted when it mattered. Aries felt tears sting his eyes, embarrassment and gratitude mixing in his throat. He thought of all the nights he'd gone to bed exhausted and hopeless, praying for a break he never quite believed would come. He accepted, his voice barely steady. As he left the building, sunlight spilling across the city, he felt something unfamiliar but beautiful, relief. Yet the biggest impact wasn't the job offer or the recognition. It was the realization that Zara's words, "Daddy, please help her," had carried more power than any punch thrown that night. Life didn't transform overnight, but it changed in ways Aries never imagined. Training was hard, the responsibility heavier than anything he'd carried before, but for the first time, effort felt like it led somewhere. He learned new skills, met people who respected him, and slowly rebuilt a sense of dignity he hadn't realized he'd lost. Zara noticed the difference before anyone else. Her father smiled more. He came home earlier. He listened with more patience. One evening, months later, Aries attended a small company event where the CEO spoke about leadership and integrity. She told the story of a single dad who reminded her what courage really looked like, not the loud kind, but the quiet decision to do the right thing when it's inconvenient and risky. Aries stood at the back of the room, Zara beside him, her hand in his, unaware that the applause was for him. Afterward, Zara looked up and asked if helping people always led to good things. Aries thought carefully before answering. He told her that kindness doesn't guarantee rewards, but it guarantees you can live with yourself, and sometimes, when you least expect it, the world answers back. The memory of that night at the market still visited him sometimes, the fear, the chaos, the moment he almost walked away. But it no longer haunted him. It reminded him of who he chose to be. The woman he helped went on to expand safety programs across her company, inspired by one man's refusal to stay silent. The video faded from social media, replaced by new distractions, but its impact remained in quieter ways, in Zara's growing confidence, in Aries' steadier footsteps, in a city that felt just a little safer because someone had intervened. Years later, when Zara wrote an essay titled, "My Hero," she didn't mention fists or fights. She wrote about a father who listened to a small voice and acted with love. And if this story touched you, even a little, take a moment now to like the video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales, because sharing real stories of compassion helps keep them alive. Somewhere, a child might be watching, learning what courage looks like, and deciding to say the words that change everything, "Please help her."